What does it have? What
Kaikki on mahdollista.
Maybe for engines.
Ne oli resytellä jotain resolutteja ja tämmöisiä oikeasti hyviäkin aluksia. Kaikki vaan palasi.
It's magic, yeah. You can do a lot of
It's kinetic. Oli murheellista, kun katsoi omia veitsejä ja rakensi jotain paskaa siellä. Tajus, ei vittu, tää oli järjestetty. Kaikki muut rakensi aluksia.
I was thinking about it in a psychological.
Yeah.
Hyvä diplomaatia siinä kohtaa jossain sai, koska sitä oikeasti hyötyi kaikki muut. Se oli loistava diplomaatinenkin. Kaikki lähti siihen, koska siitä oli kaikille hyötyä, paitsi niille, jotka ei tiennyt sitä.
What I learned from your presentation was my accuracy. I don't lose enough games.
Yes, I know.
I can't get better.
Yes, that's why. But
maybe you see the cheers running out.
But you are the one guy I was talking with my boss, as I said before. I told him you are the best, and he told me you must take a selfie with the Lizard King, or I don't believe you are in the conference.
But wait until I have my head.
Yes, of course,
But with the guns, more easily available.
The problem is, if we ever get to the same game we once did, but I did very so bad.
It's running. Okay, cool. Hey, please, folks.
It was long ago.
Let's start with the
Yes. But I was attacked by 4 players in the beginning, and it was awful. But
okay, let's move forward. Hello, everyone. Looking at the live stream or video later on. My name is Rauli. On the forums, I go by the name of SMN. And I'm going today to have a presentation where I look at a couple of diplomatic concepts. I didn't figure out a good name for it, really. So it's just some thoughts about diplomacy. But let me get started here. So, everything pretty much in order. I hope I'm somehow visible for the audience still. Okay, audio, hopefully not scrambled as last time. So, as Tuukka said in the previous presentation, strategy and diplomacy is really indivisible. There's no clear place where your strategy ends and your diplomacy starts, or the other way around. Basically, your main questions for a strategy is that who do you attack, who do you ally, and what needs to happen so that you're still on the path to victory. So, what keeps you in the competition? And I think I owe the name to Koski about diplomatic positioning or strategic diplomatic positioning, which is basically the start of everything. So, first of all, to have an idea how to win a game, we need to understand who we are, where we are, and who are we playing against, where are they, what's their skill level, and so on. And this is something that I think about as creating the diplomatic map of the cluster. And it's really like almost like a geographic map. I'm not talking about connections between clusters or big voids or connecting planets. That's an important discussion, but it's a little bit on a more detailed level. But in general, who's placed where and what can they do, who they are. So first of all, we need to read the map, which means that we need to figure out where the players are, and we need to research the players, what they can do, and that should help us to figure out what the way to victory is. So, on reading the map, actually I think a mentor here did quite something similar in a diplomatic workshop at the earlier conference. But I really like the concept.
Was it in the Helsinki? Okay.
Leiden probably, yeah, the diplomatic workshop. But anyway, here's a late game of mine, SIF sector it was called. I'm playing the Federation. And this is how I first see it. Okay, map, I'm in the northwest, empty map. I need to figure out where everybody is and figure out how to win this. There was some also great previous work in the first PlanetsCon in Frankfurt, which was done by Thin Lizzy on locating where the potential homeworld locations are. And even though the algorithms have slightly changed, that you can't anymore use ship IDs to really well tell what the actual homeworld planet ID is, it's still quite relevant. So we said further. I'm skipping quite a lot of initial discovery here. Needless to say, it requires going out, seeing around, meeting people, exchanging positions, talking. But at the start of the game, this is the initial map, the placement of races. We have.
Which turn do you have this overview? Generally?
This is a very good question. I was thinking about the very same question that when should this be done? And it's not all up to you. It's also about how active the other players are at gathering and sharing this information. But typically, if you're Empire, you should have this really early. And everybody else, somewhere between turns 10 and 15, maybe, it's feasible to think that this is nailed down. But anyway, we have Federation up here. The next clockwise is colonies, rebels, privateers, crystals, Empire, robot, Borg, lizard, fascist, and the bird. And now, basically, without knowing the skills of the people, we could have ideas on that who's going to be in trouble and how. For example, poor rebel right next to a privateer, and poor Empire with a crystal and robot here. Lizard and Borg might be, actually Borgs between robots and lizards might be in a tough spot, etc. But then we need to do the adversary analysis, because this alone doesn't really tell all that much. This is the, basically, if we think about any single decision or analysis you make in a game, this is by far, I think, the most important thing that you need to do. Because if you choose to ally the wrong player, if you ally a race and the guy drops, or if you didn't do your workings properly and you saw just a bunch of ones and didn't realize they were beginner games, all of them, you might be needlessly afraid of somebody who then folds before your opponent, and you just lost a lot of territory there. So if you misjudge a player, that's a massive disadvantage, and you really want to avoid it. So this is if you invest time in doing something, this is what you should do. You need to know who drops and who fights, because you recognize the guy who drops, he's next to you. Okay, 3 planets, I'm gonna go in. End of story. And then another important category is that there are players out there who can play a really solid game, but they are not really in the mindset of competing for victory. So these guys are players that it's really good to cooperate with. You can have strong bonds, and you can probably come out on the top still, because they won't take the last leg in the competition. And for us, if we don't know the players personally, we haven't played before them, we have only one way to find out. We need to go the profile of the players, and we need to see games, check the positions they finished in. And I call this the key performance indicators. One of the good questions is, how focused is somebody? How many games are they playing at the same time? Because I'm seriously saying the only guy I've ever seen to be able to play something like 6 or 7 games efficiently at the same time is sitting right there, and he's a double emperor. And But most of the people who play 8 games do not really pay attention to a single game, do not really care about winning any single game. If you play in too many games, you're already broadcasting diplomatically that I am not really serious about it. And you're immediately at the diplomatic disadvantage if you put it in the other way. And it's kind of connected that do they give up easily? You can look at, okay, finish it against resigned games. If there's lots of drops, lots of resignations, the player is not strong. And you don't really need to go any further than that. It's already telling quite a lot. Sometimes there are people who need to exit the site for a month, maybe half a year because of some real life event. So you should go that much behind the resignation that you kind of check some of the situations and did they like resign from the first position with the biggest fleet or something like that. So no room for making misjudgments based on that. What's the average finish in the games? Really, there needs to be 1s and 2s, and even from the profile list, it's quite easy to tell if there's a large number of achievements for even if it's a 2 or 3, it's probably a victory, and you don't really need to check farther than that. Except that you need also to consider the difficultness of the game. And for me, it's basically below 1 difficulty games. They don't really count. You might win that, but that's like Tuukka said, that's killing kittens. And then in every single game, there are a few players which are like you can't really tell from the record and the profile. You need to go into games and see how they actually do. This is probably the most difficult part, is to find as relevant as possible finished game. Because people learn, they develop, and something that they finished a year ago, maybe, they probably started that one 2 years ago, and probably were like 2 years less experience versus building up and so on. But in any case, try to find as relevant games as possible for this. I've got a couple of indicators here. One of them is the state of the economy, and I use turn 10 for that. Why turn 10? It's there's still not too many planets colonized. There's still like a easy to grasp number of ships, but there's still, you will see that most of the nearby planets have actually been explored, and you can see where they are. And then you can see and you can detect, for example, for a robot player, there's a big dump of uranium with 87% accuracy, and then there's 20 colonists and 5 factories on that planet, or something like that. That's yeah, you kind of know immediately at that point that, okay, this is not a serious competition. So what you need to pay attention to in this economy check is that if they have found solid planets, and what are they doing or have done to exploit those planets. It's actually, when you get used to it, it's fairly easy to tell. Then we have fleet size and composition at turn 25. I've used this. Tuukka has been lately arguing that turn 30 is better, and I'm starting to feel his point, so I might change this personally for me. But it's basically somewhere around where we can expect ship owner to come in. What did they achieve to build? And it's really a good telltale sign that there's a huge chunk of carriers or main battleships. So how many Merlins, how many refineries. It also tells a good story on the level of the build-up. And the final one that I like to pay some attention to is that this is also difficult, and the planet's interface makes it quite annoying to examine the diplomacy, because you need to click so many times to see the next turn's messages. I wish that was fixed at some point, but yeah.
You can use my spreadsheet for that.
Good point. Hey. Yes.
Gives you all of the
Do we discuss that at your presentation? Please. Okay. Sounds good. So, in any case, it will tell something about the style and frequency of the communication the guy is doing, because even if they play a good game, if they don't communicate, if they don't bother coordinating, they're not really interested in what anybody else do, then it's kind of, yeah, this guy is a threat, but I can probably isolate them. I can work around them and figure out something. So then we get to the next point. We combine the early positioning, who's where, and the player type of analysis, that who's strong, who's not. This was my analysis of the SIF sector. I use a green color for somebody who's just too inexperienced or distant or easy dropper or something, that they are not like seriously in the competition. And yellow one is like guys who are a little bit stronger, but can find some problems with the playing, that they probably don't bring all that much skill into the place. And red circle is then players who can actually compete for victory. I have to say,
without the race component still.
Sorry.
So not looking at which race they play or their position.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. First, just like a basically, where are the power centers of the cluster? Well, which is the territory that is not easy to go into, and which is the places which are expected to grow and become something strong.
Who are the best players?
Yeah, pretty much so.
Not the player as a race combination, but just who is the
Player.
best player. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, the race comes then in when you start to get the look at the neighbors. But as we see here, green lizard, red bog. Lizard is typically horrible for bog at the start, but if you have a lizard who can maybe expected to have one T-Rex at ship limit, yeah, lizard snack. And I could have used a little bit more levels here. I have the audacity to use a red circle for myself, but I want to keep it fairly like at 3 levels. I ended up changing a couple of opinions during the game, but this was the initial judgment based on the profiles and experiences on the games. And now, basically, just as a question, if you read this and look at this, can everybody see the text, by the way?
Yes, very good.
Yeah. If you read this, look at this, and think that you're the federation, and you're looking at the playing field like this. To which ones of you have a clear plan that what's the main threats, what are the main opportunities? Okay, mentor. I knew you would have. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah. Share with us.
Some, and I. The question was really good. And also
Very
some
interesting.
very great ideas I would like to think about. For example, if I would start with the bed, then there is that easy area far beyond where I can't reach.
But
This
my work can.
Yes, but the crystal player is always funny that the crystal is a wonderful ally also because it doesn't matter if the player sucks or not. They're always useful. So if you could find a way to reach the crystal somehow, you could kind of mine with webs, lay webs around there. The other rebels and orc and stuff can't get them.
Interesting point. Yes. By the way, one addition here. This was a 1 ally game, so not a 0 ally alliance. We can expect people to ally. Okay.
There are different possibilities. There are some plans may be viable, but you have to decide for one at first and see if you can get it going or not, and then you maybe switch to another if it doesn't work. Maybe I would try to contact the private here because he could take out the rebel or could hamper the rebel, which is a main opponent for victory, and also fits well to the rest. That would be one possibility of many, of some, I would say.
Okay, so if we're going for plans, I would go for a different approach. This is really interesting. If I read this map, then the probability that the Borg is going to come out strong and swinging and quickly develop into the primary threat. So this is what I predict to happen in the near time. Now, if I'm looking at the rest, what do I need in order to? Okay, either we go to win with the Borg, but somehow doesn't make me feel at home, because if you're going for Locutus, then you're usually the weaker part in this, and so this is something I prefer to avoid. So I would probably go for be the leader of the catch-up of the foil alliance, who's then going to stop the Borg. And in order to do that, what do we need? First of all, as a Fed, I would look for heavy carriers, rather sooner than later. So what I would do in this situation is I would contact the Rebel.
Yeah.
I would ask the Rebel to exchange bases. The Rebel can do that via Falcons. I would try to continue to be friendly with the bird. And if things work out early on, then you and the Rebel can split up the colonies. And you also have something to offer to the Rebel, because you have Loki's, and he has the privateer. So this should be easily arrangeable. And then it's going to be a catch-up race if you can contain the Borg in time, with the help of the rest. That would be my initial ideas.
Solid plan.
Any other takes? Okay. Funny thing is that that was pretty much exactly how I played. So if you want to know how it turns out, the same conclusion. This guy will be able to capture something like this fairly without problems, unless there's like an immediate effort to strengthen the line from the north, to actually cut the line somewhere. And in any case, Borg, or whatever the alliance of the Borg, can be expected to reach something like 200 planets without breaking too much of a sweat. So this was in a way very extremely unbalanced map in that sense. And I did indeed contact Rebels at the start and do a base swap, and the Rebels ended up with quite a lot of Missouris and Eroses and Lockheeds and whatnot they wanted. Basic base swap. You bring minerals, I produce what you want. I bring minerals, and you produce what I want. I ended up with 11 rushes at the ship limit, which basically lots of green circles here, which means that the ship limit is a little bit later. But that was a good thing to have. The bird was much more difficult because we collided somewhere here in this cluster, and I knew that I just can't afford to fight a skillful bird in the start, especially when there's like this big massive thing growing down here. So in the end I struck a deal which was very, I think, quite generous for the birds, but it was also left me with a clear way over here, and I figured that I'm splitting the colonies with the Rebels. And that's pretty much everything that happened. The bird was pushing the line south from here. The Rebel was pushing well, I don't really know what the Rebel was doing. He was a little bit passive and never took out the privateer properly. So he took some of the colonies and colonized a little bit of the center. And I rushed to the center. And on the other side, what happened is that the Borg ends up allying the robots. They didn't coordinate all that much. Borg went this way, robot went this way. And they reached in the end 224 planets before hitting on like the heavier defense line.
Robot is no good combination.
Yeah, they had problems with cloakers, which was our advantage there. But in any case, I took this as a specific example because it was so clear that pretty much any other way of action, except first choice, ally to Borg, be the second partner in a winning alliance, as Mentor said. Where's the fun in that? Look at the big monster, tell this guy and this guy that there's a big monster in the south, we need to do something about it. And fight that one.
One question.
Yeah.
Who did you get the croakers from?
Bird.
Yeah.
actually ended up allying the bird and not the rebel, so that was a little bit different there.
But it went just, it should be. You got the rushes from the rebels, but the rebels never became a real competition. Real competition for the
Yes,
win.
and in
Because
this case,
it went perfectly.
yeah, and this case,
But did he only require ship builds on base or also refits? Because that's.
I gave refits to everybody basically. It was just I didn't care because I was looking at the relative power related to here, and I was thinking that we need a strong rebel, a strong bird, and I need to somehow be able to kind of make strong of myself in the process. So I didn't really limit how to support these two races. It was basically everything they could come up with, refitting.
You don't have to. What you need is firepower for the win in the end game.
Yeah, yeah.
The ability to stop whatever comes up from the south.
Exactly. And we ended up then capturing quite a lot of fire clouds with the help of the birds and capture ships, and yeah.
But do you think there is something you could have did differently? Because I think you became a little bit squeezed between your allies, and that's why you didn't take the first position.
That was one of the things that in the beginning I could have been a little bit more greedy here on the Fed Bird border and get a little bit more planets in here. The second part was that they finally ended this or solved this case is that somewhere around when the Borg and Robot had over 200 planets in common, and they sent an 11 biocide invasion of bird space, and we started fighting back, and after initial fights, a few toe kills and so on, something happened that the Borg really stopped playing. They didn't do anything sensible anymore, and that solved the game. I think that we could have stopped that invasion because we were in good position to defend it against it when it was done like it was done, but also that the Borg simply lacked the will to win, so to say, because there were several different ways to gain here. They could have coordinated with robots an invasion of the crystal and privateer and approach rebels here when they detected that there's kind of an iron line being built up in this part of the galaxy. They could have been sneaking fire clouds around here and just drop 11 biocides on the backlines. Very little we could do against that. So we were also lucky in that sense.
I have another question. If you go back to the diplomacy part, you make a plan based on your viewpoint.
Yes.
Shouldn't you take into account that the other races make the same analysis? Because we identify the Borg as the enemy, but if I look at the map from their perspective,
yep,
we get. You should take that into account because they know the same thing, presumably.
I think everybody has a right to have your ideas. So
of course, but their analysis should be included in your plans if you are
Brutally put, very few people really do that.
The green ones not, the yellow maybe also not.
Green and yellow though.
Yes.
yes,
That's
Yellow
the red
though.
ones.
Red ones, yeah.
if the Borg were wise and made the analysis, they would have seen that, hey, we have 3 strong opponents in the north. I should try to make them fight together, or against each other.
Didn't they contact the rebels?
Apparently not.
Did they contact you support?
No, we didn't exchange a single message between us during the entire game. We kind of knew from the player list that what's the name of the game.
What do you think, Rauli? Would you put Borg red again in the next game, or would you put it orange?
Orange, definitely, because there was this lack of the effort, and then when the things started to get sour with the
I think they
invasion,
do
like losing the will.
Diplomacy was bad, and also they dropped very easily.
Yeah, so I think the Borg was expecting too easy a victory, and maybe was busy in real life or something, and then when it's suddenly starts to look like that, hey, I actually need to put effort in this, and then it's like too big of a stepping stone to up your game there. If you realize that, hey, I need to put, instead of the half an hour, I need to put 1.5 hours for each turn. something like that.
What's
And
the
if
phone?
you
You
analyze it,
almost
sorry,
the phone. Little bit that phone.
That one?
Yeah, you shuffle up.
Oh, good. Okay, I'll remove the parts here that are in danger.
Let's see audio recording that you requested.
Oh,
Yeah, that one at least. The other one not, but that
Yeah.
one, which one?
in Leidencon I experienced a scrambled audio, so there's no backup audio recording happening
It wasn't
here.
scrambled, it was encoded.
and if you analyze the game after it ended, if I understood it right, you ended second and not
I
first.
ended second, yeah.
And which is not what you want.
No, that wasn't. But in the end, I was also at sufficient real life pressure to not really care about it, and we had fought with the bird a good campaign
But
together.
would you have chosen maybe a different strategy or so in the afterside?
Yeah, I guess what happened here is that despite the robot was not had two main weaknesses, the early economy building was weak, and after that they were quite okay building their fleets and putting up minefields and doing the basic robot thing, and the Borgs did actually mentally give up at some point, and that led to a situation where we had clear plans that I'm gonna push towards the robot and fight here, and the bird was fighting the Borg here, and we ended up in a situation where I had max bases, minefields, and golems to push through, and the Borg was dropped. So I couldn't compete with the birds in the planet's capture rate in the end.
What I find a little bit curious is if I was the Borg, then I would definitely enlist either the help of the fascist or the lizard, one of each, because that would have solved quite some problems for him. But obviously, he didn't do that.
He didn't know.
Okay.
But if we made the same analysis, then one of the assumptions here is that we ally with one of the other red players. But shouldn't you? Maybe not a green player, but if you find one of the yellow ones, they are trustworthy players. I don't know exactly what your coding means, but you could ally, for instance, as the Fed with the fascists. That could be dependable. You could take out the birds in between, stuff like that. Yeah, you would have to. Or like, I don't know, I don't remember who said it. The green privateers to help take out the rebels. Why would you focus on the red players? I mean, to ally with.
Winning with the Fed is
Quite honestly, because that was in my analysis the only players who actually understand the full situation, and there's like a burning need to counter the threat.
And I think it depends much how wise a privateer in this case is a green player. Maybe he's unexperienced but very eager to learn, and if you have the time to find that out, and if you teach him, he does all what you teach him and learns and execute your commands, your orders properly, then he might be the better ally.
If he in my analysis, if he would have displayed the ability or willingness to learn quickly,
he
wouldn't have been green.
Okay, then I understand that you don't.
I'm hearing from the comments that it's a bit one-dimensional. It's only red, whereas you would like to see something about economic strength, eagerness to learn, all these kind of things. But then you're going to get a complicated picture.
That's a good point. I was thinking that can we add dimensions to this image, and it's crude in many ways because it lacks the reason why they are green or yellow or red.
You did the analysis.
It's clear
this
to me.
is a very easy reminder for you what the outcome of that analysis was. But for us, it's much harder to read because we didn't do that analysis.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
I also really share the point of Tuiko that your strategy will win you the game. You will be the winning alliance, but you have a high risk of being second.
Yeah.
Welcome to
that still annoys me. But I was happy with the way it happened, and we had a good fight in the end.
So if the Borg were yellow, how would you change your plans?
then I would see the main threat being either here or here, and that would.
Then you're in a difficult position because you're in the
problem is
backyard. They have the easy planets.
correct.
So if they ally,
Yeah.
you lose for sure. If they don't ally, you're still constrained on one
Problem is
side
that
and
the-
face
the
red on the
small
other
size.
side.
Can you
It's-
need to kill
Yeah.
one of them?
Probably,
Yeah, so good.
yeah. Probably in that case, I would have tried trading with the colonies and not given a good border for the birds, but actually fought over the cluster. That's but too early to say. It depends on how yellow things would have been down here. Yeah.
Nice.
Okay, I'm quickly now showing another game where I actually thought I had a massively good grand strategy and ended up losing badly because of some mistakes here. This was a zero ally game. I'm playing the birds here, and I ended up. Well, the difficulty factor was over 2. There were several strong players involved, and I think there was only one that was could be classified as a green. There were a few that could play a game but were not totally solid, and then there were some that I knew that will communicate and will play a solid game. So maybe how would you approach this? I've been thinking. I had a clear strategy. I can share it soon enough, but actually, I think my strategy was failing in the end.
Do you know if any of those red players had former alliances? That was what I would look at right now.
Yeah, if there are
Pre-alliances.
Yeah.
Alliances from earlier games.
There was heavy. There was reason to suspect that the pirates and the crystals could be friends. They had some sort of bond, and there was a challenge at some point, and they were stating that they are playing a separate game now. But clearly there was initial friendliness in this sector.
In this situation, I would ask first who would, if we can predict where the lizard goes.
It's easy.
And you must.
No, it's not easy, not at all. The lizard can have strong alliances with the crystal and with the borg. Either are extremely dangerous, and depending on where he goes, I would shape my strategy. I need to know first.
But there is a six
Zero
red,
ally.
six.
Zero ally.
Zero.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It doesn't matter. You will still temporarily ally with.
Yeah, that's true.
But there's red spot, 7 red spots. I think some of them are more red than the others.
Some of them were more
I
red.
would definitely check their games and put the more red spots, which is more red than the others.
So, but you can't give me any feedback on my question. Are there any exploding ships in crystal or box space?
I think
He's just done something
the
like
strategy is developed earlier. So,
No, not
There
necessarily.
were exploding ships in box space.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I would assume that these are tow kills from LCCs or stuff like that. So
And resolutes.
okay, so this is a critical. Okay, so then you already made.
Yeah, but you made me now tell what my initial moves were, basically.
You went against the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would have done so.
I would probably try to avoid a decision until I know where the lizard goes, because if he gets wrong, then you end up outside of the major alliance, and as a bird, this is dead. That's what happened. Huh?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, this was a difficult one because looking at this, okay, I knew that I probably can take a pirate out. I also knew that he's got a strong cluster here and knows how to play. And I thought that I can, at any point in game, I can take out the pirate. So I will likely win that competition. So, and I also knew that if the Borg builds up, and like Mogila did, builds 36 biocides to the ship limit, it's game over. So it was quite easy to use his good earlier economic achievements as a propaganda tool and get support from the other races, lizards, to take out the Borg. So at this point, I managed to capture an early fire cloud and got something like 8 or 9 fire cloud network cloned out of it. All went quite well at the point. I knew that needing some late game firepower, trade with Empire, base swap basically. He ends up building, getting 4 Resolutes and 4 Darkwings. I end up getting 3 Gorbies and I think 2 or 3 SSDs. So yeah, everything is like settled. I can win this. And I actually figured out that okay, the Empire is here in a certain ways in a easy or manageable territory here. That it could be a good idea if I boost the pirate a little bit. So here's what I in the end was like my worst case, that I thought that I can boost the pirate and I can keep things under the control because I'm the birds and I've got everything working for me in this game. So ends up I'm helping. Actually, it was quite impressive how the pirate destroyed the Fed here. I helped him with exactly one action, one single tow action, which was towing the only Loki out of the homeworld when something like 15 meteors went into destroy the Fed homeworld finally. It was a fun campaign to watch. The robots didn't do well and dropped. The Feds dropped when that happens. You can predict strong privateer, 2 dropped races, fleet increases, and suddenly privateer is here. Also, the Empire drops. Empire cited the real life reasons for dropping, and I was kind of like thinking that okay, they are friendly with they were friendly with the colonies, and I've given them several cloakers that they should be able to hold the line and kind of like limit the growth of the pirate. But suddenly pirates are growing here, then they are growing here. Fascists has meanwhile taken out the rebels, and me and lizards have split the Borgs. Crystal has lots of planets here and has developed fairly strong center. And yeah, now the problem becomes that down here I'm seeing as a pirate collaborator, which is a very accurate vision here, because I was hoping to keep them under control and I failed, which gets these guys very angry at me. And I was concentrating on next that I need to cut out the crystals before the place is full of webs. And early on, fascists and lizards were looking at the same, that crystals need to go. But now situation changes, lizards and crystals, I end up fighting both until the moment that pirates actually reached 200 planets there, but they did the final 20 in a like mad gambit that can we get there and keep them, and failed. So as a weird decision, they decided also to drop. And now we had a drop. We had basically left crystals, lizards, me. No, Fed was out, pirate was out, robots was out.
Against you, then you are in a tough bind anyway. Yeah.
And if you look at the planet densities, the crystals had really good in here. Crystals ended up winning that game. I ended up, I think, 3rd or 4th. Yeah, no, 4th, because there was a dead pirate who was above me.
The drops in the open slot was before you were there.
Yeah. Sorry?
The open slot was, there was a replacement for the pirate.
For a short while. But it was at this moment, because he had made big sacrifices at the gambit push, there wasn't much to build on.
At the end, it's 3.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So to me, it's clear that I should have done something differently. Actually,
no, I think this analysis is not valid, because you can't. If so many players drop, that's nothing you can incorporate in a valid strategy. So, or analyze. Normally, your strategy has to be based on all players are playing.
Yeah, that's true.
Someone spoke about frustration earlier on. if you make that real kill of a player,
Yeah.
chances of him dropping are bigger.
That's okay, but you can't draw conclusions out.
No,
Yeah.
no.
I think now later on, I should have realized that if I take the Fed out, then there's like a easy turf for the Pirates after that.
Okay.
It's,
Maybe.
and
Yeah.
and I should have foreseen what happens here. So that was my, I think, key mistake. I should have kept the Fed alive and like give symbolic support to the Pirate, drop a strategic minefield somewhere or something, and not so out the final good Loki. And I think I should have also, in the end, realized that for these guys, it looks like I'm purposefully handing the victory to the Pirate, which obviously wasn't the plan. But in politics, things are usually what they appear to be. So.
I mean, this is a setting where I can't see any easy way to do this. I mean, this is why just if you want feedback in this case, if I look at this, Crystal Lizard would be a combination against which you would lose. Simple as that. Even if not in the early game, in the mid game, they will definitely kill you in the end game. This is hard to contain. Lizard Walk is something which you automatically ended by carving up the Borg. And so the question is, where does the lizard go? If the lizard decides on you in some way, then it's okay. But if I was a lizard crystal is a really potent combo. This is why I meant where does it go? But the question never came up for you.
And that's also one of the things that if the Pirate wouldn't have been enabled, I feel that the lizards might have kept up with the plan to attack the crystals. And it might have ended up with me and the lizards killing the crystals here.
Then you
but I blew it. Simple as that.
Se oli yhdeltä se ruoka.
Yhdeltä ruoka, joo.
Keneltäkö me sitä ennen näisi?
Kauan se mennyt? Okay. Let's move forward then and forget the.
But on the other hand, don't we have plenty of time?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay.
I also like to discuss.
And there's equipment to keep the food warm for some time, so we're not in that much hurry then. Okay, so for the strategy to move to the execution part of it, you need to have the good economy that is base that you build on. And that's one of the cornerstones, and we will get Tuukka's presentation on how to do that, as he's the specialist. And then you have your own reputation. This is another cornerstone. This is how the other people see you. They are kind of external characteristics that you can't really affect without playing several games, which means that you can't really affect them other than in several months or years timeline. And that's like your tactical skill and your trustworthiness, your tenacity. Do you give up? Do you fight to the end? Are you actually playing for victory? Is another good one. So you have a map in front of you, the diplomatic map, and now you know kind of what the threats are, and you have the building blocks where you to think of how this could be won, if it's possible even to win it. And you need kind of map out choices to make, and think about a bit about the probabilities that how do your choices affect the end result. So things are kind of ready, but then who will listen to you? You've got a certain reputation and you have got a certain position, but building the influence thing, this is interesting. I don't think I've been all that good as doing this sort of influence building. There are players who are better at that. For example, I admire Mentor in that way. I admire Jason in that way. How they kind of speak to people and manage to build more influence than I usually manage to do. But other than, hey, look, that guy is getting out of hand. Let's do something about it. That works usually quite nicely. But okay, so last part of the presentation, which is something completely different. So, how to actually conduct diplomacy? I mean, this is not a question that can really be answered. There's no single answers. We have so many different types of players, so many different situations, so many different backgrounds. Don't really have guidelines on how to speak to people or how to address people. Different goals, different aggressiveness levels, honor codes are different. Some people see some actions differently. So there's no real guidelines to put here. I mean, sometimes you might want to use a lawyer-like contract and really define that, okay, we drop everything at turn 75 unless 5 turns earlier we haven't agreed on something else and so on. Or then you might have players who are really not into that sort of contracts at all, but just want to keep the communications very simple. So there's nothing on a detailed level really that can be said about building influence. But there's something that can be done or looked at in terms of having guidelines to it, because you can get general advice to diplomacy, where you are stuck with the guys who you fight against, you bond with them, you fight them, you lose together, you win together. It's almost like trying to give general advice for marriage, which brings us to social sciences. And there was a fascinating article in the department that I read a couple of years ago. Because in the 1970s, the divorce rates, they were going through the roof, and social scientists started to look at it. Hey, what's going on, and why does this happen? What can be done about it? What has changed that now there's so many divorces happening? And in the 1980s, there was this bloke who did marriage counseling, but he had a scientific approach to it, called John Gottman, and he did a study where he actually, the first phase of the study was that he took couples in a couple therapy session or something and interviewed them about the marriages. What are you guys, how is it going? And at the same time, he had electrodes stuck onto them that could measure the bodily responses. And he found out he had 6 years later the follow-up, along for the times when things didn't need to happen really quickly. I mean, could you have this sort of long response times today? Probably not. But he checked what's the status of the couples now. Are they happy? Are they unhappy, miserable? Are they divorced? And he found a very funny correlation there. There's like these couples, they are sitting together on the surface. They are entirely calm, and nothing is actually like they discuss in an adult manner about things. But then the physical response is different. Even if they look calm, some of them have improved heart rates. They are sweating a little bit. They have a classic fight or flight response in their bodies. They are preparing to attack or be attacked. And he found out that these two actually correlate pretty damn well, so that the people who were calm and had calm physical responses, they would be happily together still 6 years later. And the ones who had this fight or flight, they would be either miserable or divorced. Very high correlation. And he called those ones masters and disasters. And there's the link in the slide deck to the original article. I'm actually referring it quite a lot because it was very interesting. He did a follow-up study in the 1990s. And the key here was to see that try to observe these couples in a neutral or friendly environment where they can relax and not really pay too much attention to the researchers. And he started to list or make observations on how the partners communicate with each other throughout the day. He built a beautiful bed and breakfast retreat and just stayed there for the day.
Study?
Sorry?
Are we in a study right now?
My physical response now is fight or flight. But yeah. So he had 130 newlywed couples. Again, follow up 6 years later, and again he finds a very good correlation of how the partners communicate during that day, and it ends up with, I mean, if you think scientifically, 90% certainty in figuring out which couples stay together and which ones will divorce. It's absolutely insane.
But did you make a prediction after the holiday retreat?
Yes,
Then
just based on the observations on how the couples communicate with each other. And he could
did not tell them.
Sorry, guys, you know, marriage is gone. I think that was.
I give you another 2 months.
Yeah. Okay. So, what did he find out? He developed this kind of theory that throughout the days, when the partners communicate, they put out bids. This was his term. Bid is like, it can be something very mundane. Gotham's example was that the husband comments on, oh, there's a very beautiful bird out there. And, well, it's a mundane comment, but it's also not just a comment, it's a request to the partner for a response and a momentary connection on an emotional level. And that's now leaves the choice for the partner how to respond to the bid. The bid is out there, and Gotham classified them as you either turn towards or you turn away, which was basically you respond to the comment, to the bid in a way that you engage to what the other person is doing, and turn away is maybe yeah, that's cool, and continue reading your newspaper. So whatever, but basically you're not really paying attention or engaging the other person.
This is like a long message in game and only like or have some other plans.
And there's a lot in the article other than that, where they go more to which is not really applicable in our context. Like Gotham talks about the establishing based on the observations on the communications that the people can have different mindsets, where they, for example, focus on finding out things to praise or things to criticize and so on. It's fascinating altogether to read it, but I don't refer those parts more in here now. So the main findings here is that there's a very high correlation with the turn toward responses for bids and marital happiness, which means that in general, for the divorced couples, the average of turn toward responses was 33%. So 2 out of 3 requests for the communication from the partner go unanswered. And those who stayed together, 87% were which means like not all of them, but most of them are responded in an engaging way. And it's 94% accuracy in predicting. That's insane. There's a bit of continuation here still. There was like categories for the responses. There was a more recent study, only 11 years old, which is nothing, in 2006, and this was done with young couples who are not married. They were taken to the lab, and the topic was discuss positive events in their lives. And now this was more with the aim of getting and understanding and categorizing, figuring out the types of responses that are given. They had only a follow-up 2 months later, but the young couples are hectic. So they still managed to find enough meaningful data from the tracking period of those 2 months. And the study found these 4 general categories for the responses. Now we get into actually the territory where we can think about these messages in a planet's way. what is a passive destructive answer in a category. And in the study, the essence of a passive destructive answer is ignoring the message. You don't really pay attention to the message. So you might respond, but you might respond with something entirely different, or you might respond, but it's evident in your message that you didn't actually read the incoming bit or incoming message. This is interesting if we, well, the basic planet's passive destructive response is not responding at all. And for example, in many games, I've got a habit that in the start of the game, I'm sending out a slightly personalized feeler message, maybe immediately to everyone, or maybe when they send a diplomat to me. And anecdotal, of course, but my usual response rate is less than 50%. So we can kind of look at it in a way that over half of the players in any given game open it with passive destructive diplomacy, which, if you look at it from this perspective, is just stupid thing to do. Oh, sorry.
What's the difference between ignoring message and not responding?
It's the same.
Yes.
But not entirely. You might answer, but it might be evident that you didn't really actually read what's in the message. That could be also ignoring.
Someone says, "Hey, look at that bird outside."
Yeah, and you go, "That's real bad."
One of the answers would be share intelligence.
When you thought about those results, it started to ring in my head that Machiavelli keeps your friends close but your enemies closer. The most dangerous enemies I've had have been very friendly and always very keen to my messages, responsive and talkative and giving me information and stuff like that, but also very loving, you know.
It's a good observation. I think there's a lot of truth in that.
I think there's Cialdini. There's a nice film, I think, on the YouTube on the 6 laws of Cialdini.
Yes.
I think it could really help you if you. That's also with like if you come somewhere, because if you give something, then people feel obliged to do something in return. So if you make the opening bit a bit generous, you get your interest later in the game.
Cialdini has made an awful lot of research on persuasion, social studies, and he's got a lot of these rules of thumbs.
Scarcity,
he's made
those kinds of things. It's very nice.
And it's very easy to read also.
The active destructive.
Okay, well, as opposed to passive destructive, there's passive constructive, which is kind of, let's say it's a half-hearted acknowledgement that you're kind of positive, you're kind of ready, but you're not really caring. In planet's diplomacy, maybe it's a quick response that maybe addresses one of your 7 points in your message, or it doesn't lead the player to actually respond on or build on in a natural way. So in a sense, you're not message that can continue the discussion. So that's something I would classify as a passive constructive. Then the funny one, the active destructive. It was also something that happened, which is in essence it takes the bid and it diminishes it, or even the person who does it, and often it turns the conversation into something negative. To me, it's like in planets. This is why would anybody ever want to do this? There's never a really reason. But still, people
maybe
do it.
maybe anger, because the typical message is my ally or cooperation partner loses a ship, and I want to tell him, I told you you will lose the ship because you're doing something stupid, you lose it.
And to be honest, some Finns we happen to know also tend to be like that in their communication very easily. Like if the other one sends long messages, he answers that don't send me long messages. I don't like that. Bother me.
We can also be understood wrong because I think
That's true.
Someone can
Like-
understood as Finns.
For example, I once was asked help about why does my messages, why do I get so aggressive responses? But when I wrote to his messages, it was written like he would be speaking Finnish. For example, he never used the word please or something like that. It was always like a Finnish say, go there, give me this,
Yeah.
do that, do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, we don't.
We don't have this.
So this kind of messages,
but we don't
they
use
can
it
be,
often.
they can be,
No, we don't.
they can be used to the effect. I would list two things. First of all, that's as an example from my championship game. There I had a vessel at that point of time who was supplying me the ships in exchange for survival and second place, and I noticed that there were certain movements which indicated that he was toying with the idea of going behind my back. Then this is something which you really have to do then, and essentially to threaten.
I have a comment.
Essentially to threaten someone into submission. It doesn't happen often, but you can do it. And the second time I've been using something to this effect was to get someone who I knew was prone to drop, essentially to get him to do this a little bit faster.
There's certainly there's places for aggressive diplomacy.
You can use it to have somebody attack you if you know that on the defending side you're much better than if you have to go this way.
That's also a possibility.
And in your second example, you want to end the relation.
Yep.
And we are talking about how to keep the relation.
That's true. When there's no value in the relation, and that comes from or in keeping a certain level of like bonding in the relation. If it's a clear vassal relation, or you want actually the other guy to drop, as you said, then I guess it would be quite different. Yeah. Final one of the categories here, then the fourth category they found was the active constructing way. And this is where the responder in the human interface or human situations in the lab, they stopped what they are doing and they start to pay attention, and they kind of respond in an engaging way. And quotation mark goes, they use a general kind of kindness in the answer. And this quite simply also maps to the turn toward response. That's something that was in Gotham studies. And the only correlation between who stayed together and who separated was frequency of these active constructive responses. So that's what the science really has to say. Who's the not masters of love, but as masters of diplomacy, how to build influence is simply, first of all, you need to respond to the messages. You need to respond to the messages. You need to read those messages, because that way makes the other person feel that they are being paid attention to. And yeah, that's pretty much it. You also need to make those bids to the people you go to. It's very, very good to even throw some inconsequential messages. Maybe it's a little quick name, could be anything, and see if you can get a response out of it. So they are engaging, they pay attention to your situations, to your concerns. I'll always remember some games, for example, with Mentor, when I was in trouble at one point. He responds with not too long, not too short message, which has something actual ideas how to ease my situation, to build on, and so on. Like he really was listening to the situation, and I immediately kind of feel that okay, this guy is good.
You can marry?
Is mentor free?
I'm not sure. Are you? What? I think you are.
Single?
I'm single. I'm happy single.
Yeah. And I think it's always kind of maps to the feeling that the masters of diplomacy, they generally appreciate the other players, and there's a certain kind of kindness coming out of there, which should not be confused with weakness. You can declare war in a very kind way. You can crush your enemies and keep in a very friendly and appreciative relationships with them. So that's certainly kindness doesn't mean weakness.
I wish Dungeon Master would be here. He's the complete opposite, but I think you are right.
I'm not sure if it's the opposite. He's got a very aggressive play style, but it's working as well. So he's definitely keeping in touch. This is really important. I mean, as a rule of thumb.
There would be an yeah, let's continue that discussion.
He's funny.
Yeah, I want to continue on that one, but I want to also finish this one. So let's move on. I think that's where we have it. The only thing that can be reliably summarized about building diplomatic influence is that. And then there's also the most important thing to think about, that in order for you to be somebody to get these bids, you kind of first need to display something that gets you in that relationship, which is your external characteristic. You build a strong economy, you build a strong fleet, you have a solid reputation, and those. Because you can basically sweep whatever you want, but if you don't have a fleet, well, you have to cope with no divisions, so how did Stalin say it? And that's my end for the slideshow.
It's really important thing, especially in no ally games, how to keep the other players like you.
Yeah. I see. Exactly, especially because if there is 0 allies, if it's a Highlander game and you need to finish, realistically, you will not be able to achieve that without changing your relationships, adapting to it, and at the end developing something like a vessel.
Was a porter.
Yeah, and so this is the absurd reaction. The less allies you're allowed to have, the more you have to work for.
Question to everybody. I'm now cutting this presentation. It's 12:30. Our food is coming in half an hour. Are we okay to wait a little bit more for the food and give the stage back to Tuukka again for his economy presentation, or should we have a longer pause and wait for the food to come first?
I think we should eat and continue.
First eat, then continue.
Do you have after lunch? 2?
There's approximately half an hour until the lunch arrives.
Just 5 minutes before the lunch.
But okay, you'll get to 5 minutes before the lunch. Is that 5 minutes something that should be broadcasted also? Okay.
Then do it before lunch, and I can start after the lunch, I think.
Okay.
We are too much in hurry.
So for the international listeners, I will now cut the broadcast for approximately 20 minutes. Then there's going to be a short broadcast by Imok, 5 minutes or so, approximately 12:50 finish time, which is 15 minutes from now. Okay, thank you very much.